Welcome, everybody, back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today, September 30th, the final day of the month, and we're going to go over all the action we saw yesterday in Week 4 of the NFL. Not completely done, because we have some couple Monday Night Football games on tonight. We're going to preview the first one kicking off at 7:30 between the Dolphins and the Titans, and later on in the show, we're going to preview the other one between the Seahawks and the Detroit Lions, plus some more reactions to the games yesterday, Sunday Night Football, the Buccaneers win over the Eagles, and also the Colts beating the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. All of that coming up on today's show. Before we get started, though, I'd like to remind you guys, as I always do, if you guys have any questions during the show or any opinions you'd like to share or just comments you want to make, we want to hear about it. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we always thrive on any insight or any of your energy that you'd like to share on anything you'd like to say as well. So whether it's a quick comment, question, or opinion, please make sure to share it and don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and it gets featured on the show and I notice it, you can now use the new Super Chat feature. Just by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box, you're able to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. We always appreciate it. When you guys are involved with it, there's a lot of action going on in the NFL right now, so the more you guys comment and react to stuff, I always think it makes the show better. Use the Super Chat feature with any comment, question you'd like to use and make available to me during today's show. But now, we could jump into the first segment, previewing one of the Monday Night Football games on tonight. Get this preview up first, just because this is the first of the two games that we have on tonight. The early kickoff at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time between the Titans traveling down to Miami to take on the Dolphins. Not the biggest game tonight based on the record, just performances of these teams, right? The Titans at 0-3 and the Miami Dolphins at 1-2, but instead, what makes this contest still very intriguing is because of what a loss would mean to both of these teams, right? So with the stakes still as high as ever, Tennessee traveled down to Miami trying to get their first win, and Miami trying to kind of stop the bleeding a little bit with Tyler Huntley now announced as the starter by head coach Mike McDaniel. He will be starting tonight after he was just signed off of the practice squad of the Baltimore Ravens about a couple weeks ago. So, still a lot to look forward to in this game. Like I mentioned, this is the early kickoff. This is their first meeting since last year when they played exactly on December 11th when the Titans came into Miami again, and they actually beat the Dolphins 28-27, and it was one of Will Levis's best games, I thought, overall in his rookie season. They sort of upset the Dolphins because at that time the Dolphins had a very good record, one of the top offenses in the NFL, obviously, and the Titans came in. I don't think they were playing for too much, but, they came in, they surprised the Dolphins, and Will Levis played very well. Now, we're a long way away from that, obviously, because of all the changes that have gone on, but still, there could be a little bit something there, maybe, because Will Levis, as much as the pressure is on the Titans, a lot of it could be on him as well, and I'll get into that a little bit more, but looking at the Titans first here in our preview, we look at some of the injuries that they're dealing with. Their defensive tackle, Jeffrey Simmons, who I think is their most valuable defensive piece on that side of the ball, didn't practice on Saturday, and he is doubtful with an elbow injury coming into tonight's matchup. I haven't seen any updates on his status as of yet, so we'll keep you updated on that. Also, we have the defensive back for the Tennessee Titans, Chidobe Awuzie. He was placed on the IR, so he's going to be out a minimum of 4 weeks. They're going to be without one of their top defensive backs, obviously, L'Jarius Sneed. Up until this moment, I've seen that he is questionable. I don't think he will be out at this point in time, or actually, I do have some of the inactives here. Looking at the Titans, Jeffrey Simmons is inactive. So Jeffrey Simmons will not be playing. He did not make the cut. He is out with that elbow injury. I don't see L'Jarius Sneed on here, so he should be good to go. And that's pretty much the two biggest ones for the Tennessee Titans anyway, because Awuzi's obviously on the IR. So Jeffrey Simmons, a big loss tonight, could impact how the Dolphins decide to attack this Titans defense. But moving on, looking back on the game last week for the Tennessee Titans, a rough one against the Packers. The defense really standing out for the Packers in that game because there was just no run game at all, again, for the Titans. And also, Will Levis threw 2 interceptions. He lost the fumble as well. And you look on the other sideline, and their former quarterback, the one that they drafted, I think just last year or 2 years ago, Malik Willis, he showed out. He played one of his, if not the best game of his NFL career against his former team. Now, I think it has more to do with Matt LaFleur and his play calling and his scheme, but still, just adding insult to injury, really, against the Titans, former team, backup for them there, and outplayed their starting quarterback. So I think that's just the way it's gone for the Titans up until this year. Still struggling to get things going on that side of the ball. And also, looking at more of an overall outlook for the Titans in their division, them and the Jaguars are the only still winless teams in that division. The Texans just went up to 3-1. The Colts got a big win against the Steelers. Now they're 2-2. They're right there with the Texans. And now the Titans have an opportunity here to kind of just separate themselves, or at least just keep their heads above water, right? Just because this is a very important game for them, obviously. And, the offensive struggles that I mentioned before with this team, they've only have 4 passing touchdowns so far this year. And DeAndre Hopkins, who arguably is their best weapon on offense, still has not reached 100 yards on the season yet. We're almost 4 games through, and he hasn't gotten to 100 yards yet, which is a problem. And this is where I brought up Will Levis before, because 0-4, if they lose tonight's game, especially to Tyler Huntley, depending on how Will Levis plays, you may consider now changing something at that quarterback position, whether it be going to their backup or, I don't know, maybe signing someone or something like that if they really feel desperate. If Will Levis really puts on another stinker, you could decide maybe that, sort of like Bryce Young, right? Comparing it to that situation, benching him because he's just not ready yet, or, you want to fix other things and don't want to risk losing him too much. You bench him and bring in somebody else, and then that way you try to win as many games now as possible to stay afloat pretty much, because at 0-4, and if the quarterback's playing bad, it's a possibility that I really believe the Titans will consider because of all the changes that they made in the offseason, right? To have it all sort of pretty much end through the first 4 to 5 weeks, it would look very bad. So that is what I believe the Titans are sort of playing for here, obviously. And now the Dolphins, on the other hand, looking at their inactives now, the Dolphins are going to be without their linebacker, David Long Jr. He's going to be out. Raheem Mostert didn't make the cut. They were optimistic about him as well, but he is inactive for tonight's game. And their starting defensive back, Kendall Fuller, as well, is going to be out with a concussion for the Dolphins. And they're coming off of a potentially even uglier win, or uglier loss, against the Seahawks. They only scored 3 points in that game. Skylar Thompson got hurt, adding more reason why they brought in Tyler Huntley. And, now with Huntley and putting on a performance like that in Seattle, you can only really go up from there. So I'm seeing this Tyler Huntley decision to start as just something to kind of spark this offense, because they are too talented to still be 1-3, potentially 1-2, and to only be putting up 3 points is very much unacceptable for this team with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, A-Chain. I know they're still missing a couple pieces, and obviously the quarterback's not the same, but still with those weapons, I believe they're capable to beat this Titans team as well, who are coming in struggling. So it's a very even matchup when you look at it overall with both of these two teams. And, going to 1-3 as well, you're tied for last in the division with New England. It starts to become a little bit rough. Of course, you're helped out a little bit with the Jets and their upcoming schedule, how it's looking. They just lost to the Broncos. Now they're 2-2, and they have the Vikings coming up and then the Buffalo Bills, which will be a big game. So you're kind of right there with the Jets, depending on how they decide to kind of turn up for these games. So 1-3 might not be as detrimental as the Titans going 0-4, but still very much a big game because the Dolphins are trying to kickstart this thing as quickly as possible. And now some of the matchups I'm looking at here that I think will really determine this game. We mentioned before L'Jarius Sneed is going to play tonight going up against Tyreek Hill. If you guys remember last year in the playoff game between the Dolphins and the Chiefs, L'Jarius Sneed completely shut him down. So I'm expecting L'Jarius to follow him everywhere he goes and see who comes out on top. You know, Tyreek, last time they played it in Kansas City, now it's in Miami. Can he have a little bit of revenge there? I'll be looking forward to that. And just some of the factors as well. How successful will Tennessee's defense be without Jeffrey Simmons? You know, he's sort of the catalyst to everything. You know, their pass rush, stopping the run. So how much will the Dolphins also be run heavy, knowing that Jeffrey Simmons isn't going to play? How much are they going to use Tyler Huntley's legs in this situation? All of that is affected by Jeffrey Simmons. He's not going to be in there tonight, so that's going to be a big loss. And the biggest story, I think, just coming from this game, because Will Levis, I believe, is on thin ice. We've seen the sideline reactions from Brian Callahan. Everybody knows that Will Levis should be playing better, making better decisions. And so tonight, can we see a cleaner, better performance against a team that last year he had one of his best games against down here in Miami as well? And because of that, I'll be rooting for Will Levis. I believe they have enough to get it done. Having Tyler Huntley come in 2 weeks off of the practice squad from the Ravens. You started Skylar Thompson last week. I don't know how much time these receivers really have had with Tyler Huntley up until now. So I'm going to go with the Titans in this one just barely. I'm sensing a low-scoring game, but I feel like Will Levis will play a cleaner game, won't make too many mistakes. And also, speaking about talent, they have an abundance of it as well. Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley, and DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, as well. They should have enough to barely beat this Dolphins depleted roster. So I'm going with the Titans over the Dolphins in one of the doubleheader games that we have on tonight. And on that note, we're not going to get to the second game yet. We'll save that till later. But we're going to review some of the games from yesterday, starting with last night. An absolute rout of the Buffalo Bills over, or from the Baltimore Ravens, in that sense. The Ravens proving a point with that massive win at home over the Bills. And we're going to talk about Derrick Henry's performance, impressed with what the Ravens did, but also a little disappointed with what the Bills did as well. So stick around. We're going to come back to that segment when we return after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to review a lot of the action that we saw yesterday, starting with last night's game, the Sunday Night Football matchup between two heavyweights last night, between two top three quarterbacks in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Those two guys were the presumed stars of this matchup, right? The the protagonists, the ones that was going to hang the balance of this game in their hands, but it was not the competition we thought it'd be at all, really, with the Ravens beating the Buffalo Bills 35-10, and the Ravens going even now at 2-2, and the Bills suffer their first loss going to 3-1. The Ravens now on a 2-game win streak over the Bills and over the Cowboys after losing their first couple games. Now it looks like they're starting to, dare I say, find their identity. I'll touch on that a little bit more later, but looking at the stats, obviously, from the game, we know who the main star was. Obviously, at the end of the day, that was Derrick Henry, and I'll just show you guys, the kind of performance he had, unless, you guys missed the game for whatever reason. He had another monstrous game, basically. 24 carries, almost 200 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, and a passing touchdown against the Buffalo Bills. Lamar also in this contest was 13 for 18 for 156 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns, and he also had some involvement in the run game with 6 carries for 54 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown as well. So Lamar, a 3-touchdown day. Derrick Henry, a monstrous performance on the ground. And looking at those two guys being the main stars of their offense, you look around everywhere else with this Ravens team, no other wide receiver had more than 2 receptions on the day. Justice Hill led all receivers with 6 receptions. I should say just anybody with 6 receptions, not just the receivers. But on the other side, Josh Allen is the only one I'll mention because it was a rough go at it from everybody on that offensive side of the ball. Josh Allen, too, for his standards, was 16 for 29, 180 yards. He fumbled the ball once on a big hit by the Ravens defender. I know Kyle Van Noy stripped him, but he got rocked right after that. So it seems like he's all right, but at the moment, he got hit pretty hard. And only 81 rushing yards total for this entire team that was very good and efficient pretty much throughout the first 3 games at running the ball and just anything on offense. It was easy goings for the Bills. So I was very surprised with how dominant the Ravens were. I know the Ravens are a good team, obviously. The first 2 games, losing barely by an inch to the Chiefs, and then also the loss to the Raiders was bad. That one was a bad loss, but still, you wouldn't consider them a bad team. So looking at the Bills, looking like the best team potentially in the conference, to lose like this, it kind of throws everything into a loop now. I was asked the question, are the Ravens now the best team in the AFC? And because I don't have an answer to anybody else, I would probably say yes. They look like the best team in the AFC right now, just looking at last night's performance and the Chiefs. I'm sort of projecting a little bit because with the loss of Rashee Rice, I don't think the Chiefs, you can only take the idea of just finding ways to win so far, right? I believe that idea that you're good enough with your quarterback, with your play calling, and just knowing how to win, I believe that can only take you so far until talent really starts to come in and you're facing a Ravens team or a Bengals team or something like that, and you just don't have the players to compete with them. Travis is a great player, but now Sky Moore's going to get some more chances. Noah Gray is going to get more chances. Travis Kelce, they're going to target him even more, maybe some more of their running backs. But, I think the Ravens now, the way that they're kind of starting to get this train moving, I think could be pretty scary going forward. And just looking at how this game sort of played out a little bit, after the Bills got the ball first, and after they went 3-and-out in their first drive, the Ravens led 7-0 in just a blink of an eye after, I think, the first or second play. Derrick Henry broke off that 87-yard touchdown, and right after that, Baltimore scored on 3 of their first possessions to lead quickly 21-3 just in that first half, which, again, very unexpected because the defense for the Bills, I thought, was going to at least put up more of a fight than this. I just don't think they were expecting the Ravens to have such an impact on them running the ball, and that threw everything off, right? But there were 2 fourth-down decisions in this first half that sort of led to Baltimore kind of running away with it. Obviously, in hindsight, in the moment, you're not thinking that the Ravens are going to score right after this, right? You think you're going to stop them, but it was a bit of a surprise still to see Sean McDermott not go for it in these 2 situations where You're on the road. Of course, you don't want to make too big of a risk to kind of lose the game just in that moment, but it seemed like they sort of did by not going for it with Josh Allen of all quarterbacks. And the Ravens scored 2 touchdowns after those 2 short fourth down situations where Sean McDermott decides to punt the ball away. The Ravens scored 2 touchdowns, and now they're up like 18, 19 points on you. So, again, hindsight is 20/20, but Sean McDermott, Josh Allen, and how they've been able to scheme everything up so well, it's kind of hard to go away from it. It's not the main reason they lost, obviously, when you lose 35-10, but I felt like that moment could have maybe swung the momentum a little bit differently, or just stopped the Ravens from just completely taking over this game. Then, more so on the Bills, while Josh Allen made some nice throws to Khalil Shakir, the one where it got him down to, I think, the 3 or 2 yard line, that was ridiculous. That was what you expect from Josh Allen in some of the throws and his talent capabilities, but they never really got anything going. Last week I mentioned how this offense just looks like everything is perfectly timed, perfectly scripted, that, you know, Josh Allen is back there, takes a couple hitches, and finds the target he wants, and everything's perfectly on target. It was very impressive with how Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator, was orchestrating everything. But in this game, the rhythm was sort of thrown off. You know, the Ravens got out in front of them by a lot. You can't really include James Cook in the equation that much anymore. And what was funny about this was that I felt like this was the first game that that the Bills looked like they missed a wide receiver like a Stephon Diggs, right? Because a lot of the coverage, a lot of the Ravens defenders were all over these receivers, and there was not really that much space created. And, you know, I found myself thinking, like, wow, like, maybe like in these sort of games where you're trying to come back and the opposing team knows you're trying to pass a lot, having a guy like Diggs maybe draw 2 defenders, making it easier for other guys, would definitely help, or just beating one-on-one coverage if you happen to have Stephon Diggs there one-on-one with anybody else. You like your chances in that matchup as well. So this was the first time I realized, or I found myself thinking, like I said, that, like, wow, like a lot of these guys just aren't getting open. And I felt like that was the idea coming into this season, but the Bills have proved us wrong when they were able to get out in front of teams. But now they kind of got served a little bit of their own medicine, and they weren't able to come back. They had a pretty sloppy game as well, the turnovers, and their defense just not holding up as well against the run. And, you know, I'm looking at this Bills defense even more. They were able to attack and get home with 4 before this Baltimore Ravens game, but with the Ravens running it basically right at them, attacking them from the get-go with Derrick Henry, I think that threw them off a little bit. And then from that point on, if you're going to run it so much, you kind of take away the superpowers of Von Miller, Ed Oliver, Gregory Rousseau, and A.J. Epinesa, right? They're forced to defend the run. They're over-committing to stopping Derrick Henry, and then you slip it out the other way with Lamar. Trying to chase Lamar all over the field is a task within itself. So with defending the run, compiled with chasing Lamar and keeping him contained, and the little times they threw the ball overall, you really took those guys out of the game. So you didn't really see them force turnovers with just 4 getting home. And again, that was another part of this game that was very significant in the outcome. And it just emphasized more of the passing game for the Bills, because with their defense not being able to stop them, they had to chase the game now, and I don't think the receivers were quite ready for that amount of responsibility in this game. So the game obviously got away from the Bills, and then we got our final score of 35-10. But what I really liked about the Ravens, other than Derrick Henry sort of getting going, what's great for this Ravens team is that their defense really looked like the defense of last year, right? They looked scary again, in other terms, which was a good sign to see, obviously, because they were kind of labeled as being in a struggling phase, as struggling against the pass, and you didn't really know what to put your finger on that caused that sort of struggle. But I like the way that they responded here tonight, and why they looked great is because Baltimore finally ran the ball with Derrick Henry throughout the entire game, and Henry was able to keep that defense fresh, and with a 3-score lead right off of the bat, all defense are always going to look a lot better, especially this Ravens defense that has good pass rushers, can create pressure, but a lot of the times they were in close games or they just never played with a lead this big, obviously. So now they're able to pin their ears back and really go at Josh Allen. And with the coverage that they had on these receivers, also not being able to create separation, I like this bounce back performance from their defense as much as I liked it from Derrick Henry. And just lastly here on Derrick and their running game, they were able to play obviously better on offense, controlling the tempo and whatnot, but this is going back to the previous statement I mentioned at the start of this segment, how this is the identity now that we've all been waiting to see. That was a question with this Ravens team, right? What Ravens were we going to get? Who were they trying to be with Derrick, with Lamar, and these wide receivers all over their offense? What kind of team were they trying to be? I feel like now we have a better understanding of what we can see from this team going forward. Lamar not really passing too much. Derrick Henry really trying to establish him and get him going earlier on. And maybe then if you need to, you can play off of that with Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews in play action and things like that. Or you could run it more with Lamar. He hasn't really had to put on a performance where he's single-handedly won them the game yet, and that's a credit to Derrick Henry. So I think slowly they're trying to find, or they are finding their identity more and more. And this was a great game to kind of establish that against a good opponent now, giving them their first loss and cutting down that gap a little bit in the AFC North with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that they were the only team, or they and the Bengals were the only teams that won this week in the AFC North, while the Steelers and the Browns suffered their first and their third loss, respectively, for each of those teams. But moving on now to the NFC side of the NFL, we're going to look at the contest between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Eagles. Another surprising result with 33-16 in favor of the Bucs, but it was how they won and how the Eagles lost that we're going to talk about in just a few seconds. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back now on the show to continue reviewing some of the games from Sunday, and this one was an interesting one that I wanted to touch on today's show. The Buccaneers going to 3-1 over the Philadelphia Eagles in that win over the Eagles, obviously, yesterday. It was a playoff rematch of the wild card round from last year, back in Tampa Bay, like it was last year, where the Bucs hosted the Eagles. And just like last year, it was the same dominant result for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as it was last year. And I think that statement in itself, how almost a year later, a little less than that, new season later, the Eagles find themselves in this situation at Tampa Bay. Obviously not a playoff scenario, but to have the same result, I think that speaks volumes a lot about the Eagles after a whole offseason of trying to change everything, to come and play this team again and just, again, fold like you did. It says a lot about them, and I'll touch on that a little bit more later. But the Buccaneers win 33-16 regardless of that, and the Eagles now head into an early bye week at 2-2, and the Bucs go up to 3-1 leading that division, if I'm not mistaken, with the Falcons and the Saints at 2-2. Again, if I got that right. But yeah, the Bucks 3-1 now, dominant win over them, and dominant performances by Baker Mayfield especially. I actually have it pulled up here for you guys to see, just to see how much of a big day it was for Baker Mayfield, right? 30 of 47, 347 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the day for Baker Mayfield. Also, their running game was very impressive. Bucky Irving and Rachaad White, very eerily exact same stat line, 10 carries each and 49 yards each for both of them, which is pretty weird. Then Mike Evans had a big day after last week having a rough go at it. Their offense basically as a whole having a rough showing against the Denver Broncos. Mike Evans now rebounded with an 8-reception game, 94 yards, and 1 touchdown. Chris Godwin and Cade Otton also chipped in with 6 receptions each. And on the other side, Jalen Hurts, again, I was going to say lackluster, disappointing performance, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm putting it on Hurts because I have an explanation later. But regardless, he was 18 of 30 for 158 yards and 1 touchdown. He was sacked 6 times in this game, fumbled the ball twice and lost one of those as well. Saquon Barkley, 10 carries for 84 yards, which might not look that bad, but he had 1 carry that was 59 yards. And if that run doesn't happen and everything's pretty much the same, he has 10 carries or 9 carries really with for 25 yards without that 1 run, or around like 50 something yards or something like that, right? If he gains more yards elsewhere, which isn't a great game. And that's another issue I have with the Eagles. But lastly here, Dallas Goedert, 7 receptions. Paris Campbell also one of their receivers, 4 receptions. No other wide receiver had more than 2 receptions on the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday, which they're handicapped there a little bit, but still not great considering how many times they decide to pass the ball. It's not yielding the results you want, obviously. So looking at the game and kind of how it broke down and how we got to such a lopsided result, looking at Tampa Bay, they got the ball first and they scored a touchdown. They actually scored a touchdown on 3 of their first 4 drives, except one where they punted the ball away. And the Eagles, quite the opposite. Their 3 first drives were 3 punts in a row for the Eagles to start the game before, and this is pretty nuts, before they scored their first points of the game with 1:54 left in the second quarter to make it 24-7 going into the half. It was a 4th down and 1, and they miraculously got it to convert because Jalen Hurts was kind of scrambling out to the right, and it didn't look like he was going to find anybody, but thankfully for them, Paris Campbell got open, and they at least scored a point or a touchdown in the first half. And then they actually came out pretty well in the second half. They scored a touchdown to start that second half, the Eagles did, but their defense wasn't able to respond and hold off the Buccaneers from answering directly with a touchdown, making the score 30-16 at that point. And I think from that point on, the Eagles just didn't have enough gas left in the tank to kind of compete with them, and all the momentum was gone after that. And, the result was what it was. The Eagles went on to not score another point. The Buccaneers tacked on another field goal. But what I didn't like about this game, and going back to that Saquon point I mentioned, Saquon got his 3rd carry of the game in the second quarter. We had to wait a whole quarter and a half for Saquon to get his 3rd carry of the game, which is not good. It's unacceptable, honestly, for this Eagles team. And 13 missed tackles by this Philadelphia Eagles defense just at the start of the 4th quarter. I didn't keep track, or I didn't start keeping track after that 4th quarter, but there was definitely some more in there, so that number was a lot higher than 13, but still, 13 just heading into the 4th is not very good at all. And, Saquon, I'll start with him. With Saquon, decent game, right? That big run you kind of hoped would kind of spark things for this Eagles offense. They were able to score a touchdown, actually, after that, but still, think about this logic, right? You have no A.J. Brown, no Devontae Smith, no Lane Johnson, which kind of hurts the running game, obviously, but still, you're down your two best playmakers in the passing game. You still have Goddard, who had a great game last week. Jahan Dotson, he's still there trying to get acclimated, but he's still a good receiver. Paris Campbell, we haven't really seen too much of him. When A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are there, I would probably still go to Saquon, first or second option, probably, if I was calling the plays or if I was deciding on the hierarchy of those guys. For this game, for you guys, for the Eagles, to not have AJ, to not have Devontae Smith, and to still come out passing pretty heavily right away, and not use Saquon, who on a healthy roster is probably your second best, if not your best playmaker based on just talent-wise, to not give him his third carry until until the second quarter makes no sense to me at all. It's almost like this offense is backwards, and I don't know if that's on Sirianni, because I've seen people just put a lot of heat on him, obviously, and or if it's on Kellen Moore. It seems like they try to pass to set up the run instead of running the ball to set up the pass. It feels like it's almost backwards. And Lane Johnson, I know he didn't play, but still, this offensive line is decent enough to get something going in the running game. And I'll get to Jalen and how it kind of connects to him in a little bit. But on the other side of the ball, 6 sacks to Philadelphia's 2 sacks on Baker Mayfield stands out because it leads you to both quarterbacks, and this is where I'll introduce Jalen a little bit. Jalen was under duress the entire game, especially without his 2 top wide receivers like I mentioned, so Tampa Bay blitzed him a lot in this game. They got home 6 times, and for Philadelphia on the other side, they were just too passive. They were just too content with dropping 7 back and trying to over-defend Tampa's wide receivers, which are great, but you gotta send some more people. If you're not getting home with 4 for the first, because Baker looked too comfortable back there. I know it's Tampa, it's Florida, everyone's having a good time down there, and it's hard to be uncomfortable in Florida, but you kind of make Baker sweat a little bit or try to make him get off of his spot and stuff like that. He looked way too comfortable back there, just picking apart their zones and finding Mike Evans, being very content with taking the short receptions and just picking them apart like that. If rushing with 4 isn't working, I don't know why you wouldn't send more. The one time I did see them blitz, they got a sack with Brandon Graham. So to not do that more often, I really didn't understand. And, with only sending 4 also, one of your guys in the middle, Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis, is going to get doubled. And not only are they getting doubled, and it's hard for them to obviously shed the block, but they're getting a lot more tired trying to beat 2 guys rather than 1. So if you're not getting any pressure, your front 4 guys are getting tired, and you still are reluctant to send another guy, you're making it even more inefficient at that point with holding 7 back, because your front guys are tired, no one's getting any pressure, and someone's eventually going to get open. No one gets covered for that long and doesn't get open. Eventually the coverage breaks down. So it's you're not helping either side of it at that point in time. And I mentioned how the Eagles need to run the ball more because it affects Jalen Hurts. And people will get on Jalen from turning the ball over, and Jalen definitely needs to play better. But I don't understand why, if you see him struggling with the turnovers, you're still very adamant about passing early and often, especially in this game, to pass very early and not give Saquon. I would have given Saquon 3 carries in the first drive probably. Not to give him any carries like that until the second quarter. And, then you criticize Jalen Hurts for turning the ball over. I think you look at it more as an issue with, again, I don't know if it's Kellen Moore or Nick Sirianni, of why we're trying to pass the ball so much and having these 3 and outs to start the game and starting so slow, and not using Saquon to kind of get some momentum going. Because at that point, if you're successful with that, it kind of makes it easier for Jalen to kind of dissect the coverage a little bit, right? The defense knows that they're just not going to pass it and make it harder for Jalen. And I feel like the Eagles could help him out a little bit more in that regard, rather than just calling up these pass plays and having him pass a lot more often than using Saquon in the backfield. But that was one of my biggest pet peeves with this. And to me, I don't know if it's just me, but when you're getting dominated in the run game, or your team is getting dominated in the run game, trying to defend it, that is, I feel like that's frustrating, right? But I feel like when you're getting picked apart and you're getting no pass rush, and that's all the Bucs are doing, that would irk me a lot more. Because if the defense isn't getting there and Baker's just sitting there like it's a practice or something and just dinking and dunking to everybody, that's even worse, I believe, in that case, if I had to choose one or the other. And it's just weird because going into the Saints game, going back to that game, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, is that going back to the Saints game, right? The idea was that the Eagles were struggling against the run, right? They struggled against the run against the Falcons. So what did they do? They brought more pressure. They got in Derek Carr's face. They really made it an emphasis to stop Alvin Kamara, right? They did it in that game. We saw them bring more pressure in that game. And now this time, where it seems even more evident that you need to bring pressure, and against the Bucs, there wasn't too much of a run game anyway. Rachaad White and Bucky Irving only had 49 yards apiece, 100 yards, give it. It's not like they were gashing you or anything like that. Baker threw the ball almost 50 times. You weren't really struggling in the run game in this one, and you still struggled overall, right? The main problem was that you struggled in the run. The Bucs didn't run the ball, and you still looked just as bad on defense as you did a couple weeks ago against the Falcons. So it's starting to feel like it's more coaching scheme-wise and things outside of just playing football. And of course it hurts not having, no pun intended, by the way, it hurts not having AJ and Devontae Smith, right? But I feel like there's still a lot of good pieces on this team, right? Jalen Carter, to not mention him at all, is a problem. Jordan Davis as well. Their free agent signing, Bryce Huff, I think he's only recorded at one tackle throughout the first 4 games, which is insane. They have CJ Gardner-Johnson, who's decent. Darius Slay's great. Their offensive line is still fantastic, so it feels like it's things outside of football that the Eagles, I guess now going into a bye week, they'll get healthy, they'll try to reevaluate some things, but not the best way to head into the bye, and I don't really like the idea of an early bye either, so it's good that they can kind of take a break and reevaluate things, but still, I'm not a big fan of the early bye. But the Eagles go to 2-2, the Bucs go to 3-1. And speaking of going to 3-1, the Steelers lose their first game, and we're going to talk about it. That loss to the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts go to 2-2 on the season, so we're going to break it down, go through the recap, and talk about how the Colts won this game. So stay tuned. We'll be right back very shortly.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and in our last review of today's show, going over a very interesting game between the Colts and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers got their first loss of 2024 at the hands of Joe Flacco, actually, and the Colts, 27-24 was the final score. Pittsburgh now at 3-1, and the Colts' big win go to 2-2. And looking at the stats in this game, I mentioned Joe Flacco because Anthony Richardson got hurt early in this one. He was out for a couple plays with a hip injury, and then he came back. And I don't know why they ran another run play. They ran another run play with him after he got hurt on the last run play, and he got hit by Minka Fitzpatrick, and he went out again. So his day was done earlier on, but Joe Flacco came in and played very well. 16 of 26 for 168 yards and 2 passing touchdowns after Anthony Richardson went out, obviously, and Jonathan Taylor was one of the stars of the day. He had 21 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown as well. Michael Pittman had his best game of the season, 6 receptions for 113 yards, and Josh Downs as well. I can't forget about him. He had 8 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. Very good performance from the Colts defense, but even still, it was a very close game because on the other side, Justin Fields, stats-wise, had his best game of the year, 22 of 34, 312 yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 2 rushing touchdowns on the day. George Pickens, or also Justin Fields had a fumble lost in those stats. George Pickens, 7 receptions for 113 yards, and another fumble lost by one of the big stars for the Steelers. And Pittsburgh had 122 rushing yards as well, but Najee Harris only accounted for 13 of them, 19 of them. Justin Fields led all rushers with the amount of yards he got, but it's still a problem. It's still a problem for Najee Harris to only have 19 yards in a game. Is not good for this Steelers team to still only be still be at a 3-point loss is still pretty remarkable. But this is the first time Pittsburgh Steelers not had a game where he recorded over 36 receiving yards, and the Steelers lost both of those records, if you will, in this game. They allowed, obviously, 27 points, and Michael Pittman had a day at over 100 yards in this one as well. So, not the best game by the Steelers defense at all. If there is going to be a loser, it would be that unit, I believe. But looking at the game recap a little bit more, the Colts came out very, very aggressive. They came out hitting hard on defense. They came out very aggressive on offense, going right at the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, running it right down the field at them. And before you know it, it was 17-0 early in this game. Pittsburgh hit a field goal to make it 17-3 going into the half. So very non-existent performance in this first half by the Steelers. Cordell Patterson had a decent game, but he was ruled out with an ankle injury. I believe it's a high ankle sprain. So Najee Harris, the bell cow now for the Steelers, only recorded 19 yards, like I said. And it alludes to the fact how they only put up 3 points in that first half. So not very efficient. But what I will mention is that George Pickens actually also fumbled the ball at the 3:13 mark of the second quarter. So they could have put up 6 points. And while it doesn't look like a big difference, obviously when you're talking about a 3-point game, in hindsight, it's obviously a big deal. But, George had that fumble with 3:13 left in the second quarter. I couldn't believe it when I was watching the game. It was a great drive. They were putting a great drive. I believe that was the drive where Cordell Patterson got it going for them. And it was a good throw over to George, just nice and simple. And he was heading towards the sidelines, and the ball just got punched out. He was sort of holding it in one hand. And like the game was going right at that point, he fumbles it. Going out of bounds, he fumbles it back in bounds, and the Colts recover it. And it's just the Steelers walk away with no points, obviously. And then in the second half, the Steelers are sort of driving here again. They got something going to start the second half. And Justin Fields, very unfortunate for him, I think. It's the first real big mistake we've seen from him where it looks like he's just trying to do too much. He kind of slips trying to get away from Colts pass rushers, and his elbow kind of hits the ground, knocks the ball loose a little bit, and the Colts players, defenders, credit to them, come in and really punch the ball out on the ground, and it's deemed the fumble. The Steelers lose like 20 yards or something off of that play, and they lose the ball also. So it was a big mistake, obviously, but even still, Pittsburgh's defense made some timely stops in the second half. The Steelers, I can't remember the last time they scored 3 touchdowns in a half. They did exactly that. They scored 3 touchdowns in the second half to make it 27-24 at the 3:40-minute mark left in the fourth quarter. And again, after the defense made another stop, they went 3-and-out after that point. Pittsburgh's last drive was looking good. Again, it looked like the momentum had switched over to the Steelers, right? Their defense was kind of coming up a little bit better now towards the end. I was thinking maybe like, all right, bad game overall from the defense, but if they were able to salvage this with this 3-and-out, they did that, and the Steelers were to win or at least tie it, you you wouldn't overlook it, but it wouldn't be like the end of the world, right? And they did exactly that. They got the ball back to the Steelers offense, and it was looking good. Like I said, the momentum, it looked like was shifting over to the Steelers. Justin Fields was looking like he was going to put together this 2-minute drive, and you get another botch snap. You get another messed up snap where after the game, Justin Fields clarified that it was his fault, that he just wasn't ready for the snap where he should have been. Basically, he clarified how like some quarterbacks kick their leg out, right? They kind of kick it out and kind of signaling to the left guard. If you guys like really pay attention to the snap, how the quarterback kind of snaps his leg, kicks his leg out. The left, the right guard taps the center while he's making calls out or whatever, and kind of letting him know, to snap the ball. And Justin Fields said that, that was all great, that was all right. But in the last second, the Colts defense, their safeties, had actually rotated a little bit different. So Justin Fields took his eye off of the snap, right? Looking at how the Colts safeties had moved, he wanted to reevaluate everything quickly. But obviously the snap came in, it hit him in the face, and they lost yards off of that, and they just couldn't overcome that mistake there at the end. And they couldn't convert, obviously, so they end up losing the game 27-24. And, you look at those two mistakes by Fields, and you look at the performance, and it's not like one negates the other. Mike Tomlin said after the game that it was just a very sloppy game from Fields, but also the entire team overall. But still, I think more so it's a credit to Indianapolis because their offensive line really just defeated the Steelers' defensive line in this game. TJ Watt, Nick Herbig really had no impact in this game. They ran the ball great early and often to set the tone, and the turnover battle was won by the Colts in this game, right? You look at the first couple games for the Steelers, right? The turnover battle was in their favor. I think they were coming in at +7 or something like that. But the way this Steelers team is made up, great defense, running the ball, and doing enough with Justin Fields, right, it seems. The turnover battle is so pivotal to that, right? You can't lose that because you lose that, it puts your team in worse spots, right? Now instead of, relying on your defense, you're putting them in worse spots after all these turnovers. And it's very unfortunate because it looked like they could have overcame that on top of this, but it was just like Mike Tomlin said, too many mistakes, too sloppy at times where they needed to be perfect, and they just can't lose a turnover battle and make these sort of mistakes. But again, with this loss, obviously it's not ideal with the Steelers obviously losing a game because I think a lot of them shared the same sentiment I'm about to share. It felt like they beat themselves rather than the Colts just dominating them. Credit again to the Colts because their defenders played great. To force those 2 fumbles was great defense. To still create a lot of pressure with no DeForest Buckner, with no Ebukam in their game. Credit to them. Their offensive line played great. Joe Flacco was hardly ever touched, only on a couple occasions. But still, through all of that, the Steelers were still like, you think back to those 2 situations, like I said, with George, at worst, that's probably 3 points. You're thinking about a tie game at that point. Justin Fields, again, if he doesn't fumble the ball or runs backwards, maybe that's another 3 points there. And still, that was, you think of those moments, I can't help but think that maybe if one of those kind of swing your way, the Steelers, come out with a lucky win here. But there was also other moments that affected this win overall. For as bad as the defense was, they had chances to still stop drives, but it was kind of going that way where nothing was going their way, honestly, quite frankly. Joey Porter Jr. in the first drive had a play on the ball from Anthony Richardson. He just missed, or it was just thrown perfectly right over him. That could have been a pass breakup or something. That was one. Joey Porter Jr. again dropped an interception in the end zone. A great read by him, but he just dropped the ball. That could have been points taken off the board. I'm pretty sure the Colts got 3 points off of that, so you're looking at a tie ball game potentially. Minkah Fitzpatrick's unnecessary roughness call, not the right call. I don't know what else to say it as. Bogus call. it didn't decide the game. It had a big impact on it, but it definitely wasn't the only thing that decided it, but not the right call. I'll stand by that. And the biggest thing for this defense was just constant letdowns, was the third down conversions by the Colts. Another credit to them. They were very good on third down. The Colts converted on 53.3% on their third downs, and it's just not good for a good defense to not get off of the field. Over half the time to not get off of the field is not a good look. And still, their offense was right there. But still, overall, I'm not going to touch on it now, obviously, for the sake of time, but Justin Fields is still the quarterback of this team. I haven't changed my opinion on that. If anything, it strengthened it a little bit more because he played great. The rushing touchdowns were huge. The passing touchdown to Pat Freiermuth was huge as well. They're still learning things, obviously, like the snap. That can't happen again. And, not trying to do too much as well. Not trying to be Superman at times. But those are correctable. And it's not like I'm going to bench him now going against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. He is still the quarterback. I was very impressed because this was the first test where you saw Justin having to do a little bit more in offense, and I thought he played very well overall. If it wasn't for a couple mistakes also by the defense and just everybody overall, maybe this game turns out differently. I don't know, but it feels like that way to me at least. But credit to the Colts, good win at home to the Bears and now at home to the Pittsburgh Steelers, staying close to the Texans in that divisional race. But that'll be all the reviews we get to on today's show. We're going to preview the last Monday Night Football game coming up, the ladder kickoff at 8:15 Eastern Time between the Seahawks and the Detroit Lions. A good one here to talk about to close out the show. We'll be right back with that preview in just a few moments. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, previewing the last Monday Night Football game we have on tonight's slate between the Seattle Seahawks, the undefeated Seattle Seahawks, and the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football. The Lions coming off of a close win last week over the Arizona Cardinals to go to 2-1. The Seahawks leading the NFC West. The last time they won the division was back in 2020, and now they're back in first place at 3-0, trying to stay undefeated and be one of 3 undefeated teams still left in the NFL. It would be them, the Vikings, and the Chiefs, still the only undefeated team. So Mike Macdonald doing a very good job with this Seahawks team overall. And Lions, on the other hand, tied for second place. I guess now technically not tied anymore with Green Bay at 2-1. They could take sole possession of that if they win tonight as well. So big implications there in terms of the divisional seedings from that regard. And something interesting on this game as well. Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Detroit Lions, is 0-3 against the Seahawks since his time in Detroit. Lost to them in each of the last 3 seasons. So is it his kryptonite, or can he finally break the curse tonight? It seems like we're going to get into that in this segment. Looking first at the Seattle Seahawks, though, we have the inactives now officially for this game, getting closer and closer to kickoff. Some big names on this injury list, because there's going to be no Jerome Baker for the Seattle Seahawks, one of their starting linebackers. There's going to be no Leonard Williams for the Seahawks as well. No Byron Murphy for the Seahawks also, and no Nwosu. He's still out from the preseason where he got hurt, and no Boye Mafe as well. Basically, their entire defensive line and a bit of their front five, front seven the majority are not playing. No Leonard Williams, no Byron Murphy, no Nwosu, no Mafe, and no Jerome Baker as well. Big injuries for the Seahawks defense, who, again, their defense has been playing very, very well to start the year, but they're going to be without a lot of big-time players in this matchup. And starting off with that defense, I haven't watched too many Seahawks games, but I had no idea that this Seahawks team is one of the top-ranked defenses against the pass, holding their first three opponents to 150 yards or less in all three of those games, which is very impressive. Again, Mike Macdonald, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised with how good of a job he did in Baltimore, but still, I was sleeping on the Seahawks. I really was. I was sleeping on their defense and how productive it could be with this offense, but they've been playing very well. And on the offensive side of the ball, the wizard, the guru for the Seahawks is their new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb. Came over from Washington University and has been a revelation so far for this offense, because you look at the downfield passes to DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba having a 12-catch game against the Patriots, and Geno Smith playing well in large part because of Ryan Grubb. They're hitting on all cylinders, it seems like. Mike Macdonald is coaching very well. Ryan Grubb, this new hip offensive coordinator coming in to the NFL, is playing very well. I gotta stop saying playing, is coaching very well for the Seahawks team, and they're undefeated still for good reason. Now, if you want to talk about their opponents, that's a different conversation, right? The Dolphins, no Tua. The Patriots, they beat in overtime, and the Denver Broncos. If you think those are all bad teams or whatnot, however you gauge it, that's your opinion. The Dolphins is the only certain one, I would say. The Patriots, they put up a good fight against them, and the Broncos just beat the Jets, so it's not too bad, but still, a lot of credit to the Seahawks team for playing very well early on. And then looking at the Detroit Lions as well, they're also dealing with some injuries, looking at their inactive list as well. There's going to be no Frank Ragnow. We knew he was going to be out with that pectoral injury, if I'm not mistaken. Also, Sam Laporta is active. He is not on this injury report that I see, so he's going to be active. They're going to be without Brian Branch, their safety, their second-year safety. He is inactive with an illness in tonight's game, so wasn't expecting that. They're going to be without a couple defensive pieces, the Detroit Lions are, but it's big that Sam Laporta is able to play tonight, going up against that top-ranked passing defense in the Seahawks. Having Laporta there is going to be huge. They're obviously, for this Detroit Lions team, their running game still looks very dominant. But something to know about this Lions offense overall, and how they're still 2-1. They're looking pretty good. The running game's been great, but Jared Goff, I didn't know this. Jared Goff has thrown more interceptions up until this point than passing touchdowns so far, and maybe they're just running every touchdown in. That could be an answer, but it looks worse than it might actually be. They struggled in that game against the Bucs in the red zone. That definitely has a lot to do with it, but it's not something right now that I'm really freaking out about, but it is interesting. That is something that I didn't know for this Lions team that I consider one of the best in the NFC. Their defense has been playing great. Their defense is top 4 in rush yards allowed, and also top 4 in rushing yards per game. Aiden Hutchinson has 6.5 sacks so far 4.5 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that loss. And on the offensive side of the ball as well, Jameson Williams is having a good start to this offense, which I believe they kind of needed somebody like this to complement Sam Laporta, complement and add to Amon-Ra St. Brown. You already have two great running backs. Having Jameson Williams in there now is great. Is great for this Lions offense overall. So we're gonna have a good matchup here, I think, based on just the records and performances of this game compared to the other game that's kicking off right now. This one definitely draws more eyes based on the names, the records and things like that. But talking about some of those names and reputations, looking at some of the key matchups now, I'm really interested to see Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams going up against Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon for the Seattle Seahawks. Two good wide receivers, two young, very exciting wide receivers for the Lions, and two young, very good defensive backs for the Seahawks. And with a lot of their defensive line being out, there's going to be more pressure on the coverage guys to hold it a little bit longer. So how successful are they going to be with that? How quickly are Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams able to get open, knowing that maybe they have a bit extra time now, or just not having that pass rush there is huge for the Lions as well. So those are going to be two key matchups. Also, speaking of the offensive line and defensive line, Detroit's offensive line, one of the best in the NFL, going up against this injured and depleted defensive line for the Seahawks. That's going to be my deciding factor in my pick, but that it doesn't look great right now for the Seahawks defensive line, missing all of those guys. And lastly here, it'll be Mike Macdonald, a defensive-minded coach. I'm sure he has a lot to say on the defensive side of the ball, obviously, going up against Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions. Ben Johnson was a big name thrown around there in a lot of head coaching job vacancies, and obviously he wasn't hired. He decided to come back to Detroit, but still he has been tabbed as a very good play caller, a guy that's been responsible for the success of this offense. And against Mike Macdonald and how good their defense is going to be, that chess match between coordinators and coaches is really something that I'm fascinated with. And moving on to the factors now, a couple here only. How well can the Seahawks defensive line hold up against a very good, probably the best offensive line in football, the Detroit Lions one? So that's going to be a deciding factor for everything. That essentially affects the coverage, the running game, the passing game as well, and disrupting Jared Goff. So can this defense, the Seattle Seahawks defense, sort of beat the odds there and still create some pressure? And also, can Jared Goff shake off some of the doubts with going up against one of the NFL's best passing defenses? And that stat I threw out about him throwing more interceptions than passing touchdowns, can he go out here, put on a show, put on a great performance, throw for like 2 or 3 touchdowns or something like that, and kind of shut up some of the criticism and haters out there around maybe having doubts about him passing-wise? Is he able to do that if it requires in the game? And with all of that being said, I feel like Dan Campbell now will break this 0-3 streak. They'll get their first win. He'll get his first win against the Seahawks. And basically, like I said, the defensive line being so injured for the Seahawks, I believe, is a big thing that I just can't overlook, because this Lions defense is so good. They're one of the best, just nastiest, toughest defensive lines. To just go after the Seahawks defensive line is going to be tough for them, I feel like, to overcome. And then you're asking the defensive backs to cover too long, and I just feel like things break down from that point on. So I have the Lions winning in this one. Seahawks haven't really faced a team like this before. As much as I wanted to give them a bit of credit for the first 3 games, the Lions are way better than the Broncos, the Dolphins, and the Patriots. So this will be a good test to see where the Seahawks are really at. But I'm going with the Lions. I'm going with the Lions on the road to go to 3-1. Keep some pressure on the Vikings and the Seahawks to also drop to 3-1 overall. But that'll be it for this segment and the entire show. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Chip Shot Football Podcast. please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. Check out both YouTube channels for more of the GSMC Chip Shot Football podcast on there, covering everything to do with the NFL. And make sure to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more stories and even more coverage around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you guys for joining me. Again, go watch the games. We'll talk about it tomorrow, and I'll see you guys back here same time tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.